With the COVID-19 numbers climbing, Governor Ron DeSantis has been holding almost daily briefings. At FIU on Friday, the governor revealed the average age of those testing positive is getting younger, now 30s and 40s.
Jeanette Nunez, his lieutenant governor from Kendall, was with the governor on Friday as he talked about those spiking COVID-19 numbers. And that's where I began when I sat down with the lieutenant governor.
So I think you're correct. Obviously, there's a spike in the number of cases, but I want to be clear, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a spike in the number of people that are sick. A lot of these cases that we're detecting are asymptomatic, and I'll give you a perfect example. What we've seen in particular communities, for example, Alachua County, we went and we tested 100 farm workers. Of those, 90 were positive, so 90% positivity rate in that cohort, but very few, if any, were sick. And as we've seen the median age decline, I think that bodes well for the ability to weather the storm, if you will, to be able to handle the virus.
Right. And we have just learned at a news conference that preceded this conversation that in Broward County, the median age now is 33 for people who are being infected, and it's 41 in Miami-Dade. I mean, this is way down from what it was in mid-March.
Absolutely. At the height of the pandemic, at the beginning of March and leading into April, when we saw that peak, what we saw was the vast majority of people, the median age for people getting COVID-19 was in the 60s. That has continuously dwindled, and right now statewide it's 37. And again, that speaks to the individuals that are getting positive results. Sometimes they don't even know they have it, they're asymptomatic, and they're not as sick as those that are elderly.
Right. Some of these statistics that we are just learning late this week seem to indicate that there are a lot of particularly younger people who have been going out, not so much maybe in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties where we're still in basically early phase 2. But even here, people are going out, they're not wearing masks, they're not staying 6 feet away from other people. How do you get them to do this?
I think that was an important point that Mayor Jimenez made at the press conference in terms of, we've been starting March 19th, I believe, Miami-Dade was in a shelter-at-home order, and so we're still not, like the rest of the state, in full phase 2 with regards to openings, and I think it's important to really hone in on that message, and that's something the Department of Health is going to be working very closely with our local municipalities to make sure people understand that you need to take precautions. This virus is still amongst us. There's no vaccine, there's no cure right now. And so while people my age and younger may fare better from a COVID-19 diagnosis, that doesn't necessarily mean you might not spread it to a parent or a grandparent. And that's the key, to really make sure people heed the warnings.
Would you go so far, would the governor go so far as to have police agencies issue tickets to people who refuse to say wear a mask or not stay 6 feet apart?
I don't believe the governor would go that far as to criminalize people that are walking around without a mask. I do believe that he feels the vast majority of Floridians want to do the right thing. I think you heard the mayor said they're going to beef up their enforcement, and that's both from the standpoint of businesses, making sure they're complying with the regulations that they are supposed to be complying with, but also individuals. We all have a responsibility and we all have a role to play in combating COVID-19.
Yeah. Over the last couple of weeks, of course, I have talked to some people whose argument is, hey, I'm an American. You can't force me to wear a mask. You can't do this. I'm constitutionally, protected. What do you say to that person?
Well, certainly from a constitutional perspective, it is difficult to argue that they must wear a mask. I know a lot of people were very upset when they saw a lot of those protests where people weren't socially distancing or wearing a mask. And so what's good for one group is good for the other. But what I would say to those individuals, that while it may be your constitutional right, we have a responsibility to each other, and we have a really important role to play in making sure we prevent this spread from growing. And we want to make sure we protect those most vulnerable, and that includes our elderly and those with underlying conditions.
There is a social contract. Not everybody has signed it, but there is a social contract. Lieutenant Governor, clearly this pandemic has created a huge financial crisis for the state of Florida. I guess in the first month, tax revenues were down by what, $900 million or something. So what is the governor going to do to cut out of the budget that was passed to make the state solvent, which it by law must be solvent.
I think what you heard the governor say a couple of days ago is that he's going to take a long, hard look at the budget that was presented to him by the legislature. It was clearly under different circumstances and different conditions, and we've now seen the negative impact on Florida. He's going to make sure that he goes in and analyzes each and every spending item, and I suspect that his veto pen will get a lot more use this year than it did last year.
Yeah. Florida Tax Watch, a kind of a pro bono, a watchdog group, says that what you should do is to stop the pay raises for state employees and teachers that is in the current budget. What do you think about that idea?
I don't know if the governor is contemplating vetoing those pay raises. It'll certainly be on the table and up for discussion, but I think both of those are important. Those are something that the legislature put as priorities. He'll take a look at it, but I don't know. I think he was pretty adamant about the teacher raises, so we'll have to take a look at both of those aspects.
Yeah. I just looked at the new state unemployment figures, which were released just before we sat down, and the statewide figure is 14.5%. In Monroe County, nearly 18% of people are unemployed. In Miami-Dade, it's 11.3%. In Broward, it's 16%. I mean, there just are a lot of people who are suffering and out of a job right now. How is the state going to help them?
Absolutely, and that's been something that I've said all along. We've had to deal with two crises. So one, the pandemic from a public health perspective, and then the other, the economic crisis that Florida has seen. As we know, tourism is our #1 industry. Record number of tourists last year, 127 million. This year, you referenced some of those local numbers, and clearly Monroe County had a checkpoint. They weren't allowing non-locals entering into their economy, so that's why I think their numbers are a little bit higher. It is difficult, but I will say there are glimmers of hope. The numbers that were announced today showed a slight uptick in jobs from April to May. What we're seeing is 33% increase in small business revenue, 40% increase in job postings. So small slivers of hope, and we're confident that once we're able to get back up and running, things will improve.
Yeah. Lieutenant Governor Nunez, there was a huge court ruling this week, a couple of them from the Supreme Court, but the one on DACA that's going to, at least temporarily, allow dreamers, and we know a lot of dreamers, I'm sure you know, I know some, it's going to allow them to stay, and if Congress acts, then eventually maybe have a path to citizenship, permanent residency. You know, this must please you, this decision.
Well, certainly I think as we've seen this drag on for years, I think that to be able to find some permanency or some solution for these individuals from the Supreme Court, and obviously Congress has not really been able to act over the course of the past decade, really. I think it's important that we move forward and find a way to move forward.
Yeah. Finally, late August, as you know, the Republican National Convention is going to be held in Jacksonville. And the president, August 27th, is in person going to accept the party's nomination. Are you going to be there to see that?
Yes, I plan to be there. I think it's great that Jacksonville will be able to showcase a great convention. I think the decision to move to Jacksonville was one that Floridians are excited about, and I think that the governor is excited about it as well.
Yeah, but do you have any misgivings about putting a huge crowd, 15,000, 16,000 people in an indoor arena while we are still before there is a vaccine for COVID-19?
I know they're working on a lot of plans and protocols to make sure that everyone that attends is safe. They're going to do a great job at keeping those individuals safe. And so I think that you'll see a lot of that unveiled over the course of the next couple of weeks. And again, we won't have a vaccine. Some people say it's forthcoming. Some people say it won't be but for a year. And I think that there's a lot of discussions around not just the vaccine, but the protocols, the antivirals. And so I think that, again, we're just going to do the right thing, make sure people are safe, and make sure that it is a great time for all.
Lieutenant Governor, great to speak with you. Thanks very much.
Always good to see you, Michael.